rudimentary, elementary. It was basically a child's drawing.
You know what Albert Einstein said? If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough.
Josh went to great lengths to ground all of the science, all of the science. So in the mechanics of each individual character's powers, the mechanics of travel through time and space, he was relentless in insisting that there be a solid foundation and that the designs or the costumes or the behavior reflected that science.
In terms of Reed's stretching and Sue's spectral abilities and Johnny's fire. These are superpowers that started with who they were as human beings before anything happened to them. Reed's high-level intelligence, Ben, bravery, courage, Johnny's charisma and also courage, Sue, in terms of her high-level intelligence, they all come into this with something very, very special. The core of their natural human powers that they came into this with are not changed, they're only heightened by the gifts that they're given. So I wanted it to look like science, not like powers.
When they are escaping from their first visit to Planet Zero, the planet is almost attacking them because they're a foreign invader and it senses that. And as they're trying to escape back to Earth and the planet is attacking them, rocks and energy are being thrust at the shuttle. We wanted all of the powers to relate in some way to the planet where everything happens. So each of their powers somehow ties into Planet Zero and or into the quantum gate.
We tried to tie the events of the shuttle accident with their powers. So you see Ben struggling to get the door closed and he's getting pummeled by rocks that's coming inside. Johnny, there's a little fire that kicks off in his shuttle and he's struggling and a fire comes through the window.
Sue doesn't actually travel to Planet Zero, but when they come back and everything goes wrong, there's a large blast of energy that takes her down, and that's actually where her powers grow from.
Reed is a tricky one. That was a little more sleight of hand. We showed Reed when he's trying to help Victor on the cliff's edge. Victor has fallen and Reed's trying to help him up. There's a little transference of an energy effect, and it's almost, if you're not looking, you'll miss it. Reed's arm stretches ever so slightly and then retracts. And that's kind of only our little telltale sign of Reed.
When we first see all of them after the accident, they're all confused and a little terrified. Reed has stretched himself out and doesn't understand what's happened.
We didn't want to make him, like, no offense to Stretch Armstrong, but as Stretch Armstrong, we tried to come up with something unique and original and believable, not silly.
We didn't want him to get too skinny and flimsy looking. We wanted him to stay sort of a masculine figure, so we cheated in a way to where we kept a lot of muscle structure and bone and tried to make his joints stay really visible to try and make it a little more believable.
One of the most interesting days that I had on set was when my character wakes up in the hospital, Area 57, and I kind of see my body, this and that, whatever. So what Josh would do is that he would talk to me over a microphone on what my hand was doing. He's like, now your hand starts to go through the brackets and kind of feel around, look around. And then there's a scene where I escape.
He's crawling in the vents and we see him stretched out. He's splayed out and retracting in. It looks painful with bones breaking or muscles moving.
Somehow she's shifting in and out of the visible spectrum. We don't know how.
Sue is kind of an internal person to begin with, so the fact that she goes invisible is very specific.
She's physically manifesting powers that have to do with force fields that emerge from her own transparency.
Sue's powers all come from the quantum gate, and they affect visibility and the way light wraps around her so that you're seeing the environment reflected off of her, and she, in a way, becomes invisible. She can also generate force fields around herself, and she can also throw force fields that wield power, almost like a bomb or a rocket.
When the quantum gate comes back to Earth and is affected by the explosion on Planet Zero, we wanted to tie those two effects together. Sue's energy and bubble with the quantum gate energy.
We went through a lot of research and development on Sue's bubbles. We wanted it to not look too much like water or too much like smoke. It needed to be sort of an energy plasma look to it, which was actually very tricky to come by. So it actually was one of the toughest effects to land on for us because it was something that we don't see very often.
I believe in the original comic and design of years ago, she has a blue glow around her, and we didn't want every shot of her to have a blue glow, but when she has her powers, she's got some blue glow that comes off her hands. There's a scene in the movie where she's pushing the containers, trying to exercise her abilities, and you see blue energy around her hands. That's being faithful to the look of the comics, is that blue energy.
One of the things Josh came up with that helped humanize using my power was he wanted to make it very clear that it's not easy. It's exhausting mentally and physically. It's as if to go invisible or to use a force field is as if I've run a marathon or that I've held my breath underwater for an inhuman amount of time.
And then for Johnny, well, he's on fire.
I think just the notion of a guy who can set himself on fire and fly is just naturally appealing.
Johnny is definitely the one who looks at this as a big opportunity to finally find his purpose. To be like, you know, maybe this is my thing, maybe this is my calling.
Johnny has this sort of uncontrollable fire core that's constantly burning inside of him. Fire on film is tricky because it's so bright and it's so hot that it blows out the frame really quickly. A lot of times you lose a lot of what's going on in the image because it's so bright and overexposed. You actually get more control over the look of the image using CG fire because you can take down some of those inherent photographic qualities of flame to make it more visible.
Early on, we went up to Vancouver and tested what does it look like. We got a stunt guy, lit him on fire, put him on wires, and flew him around.
And then we did additional tests where we had a CG version of a man on fire, and we would put them next to each other and see which look would give us the best result when we got to the end. And we went with the CG fire over the actual man on fire, although the man on fire looked pretty cool, I will admit. Johnny wakes up in Area 57 after going through the accident at the Baxter lab, and he finds himself engulfed in flames and doesn't understand what's happening to him.
The first time we see him, it's horrific as an audience. It's disturbing because you're seeing the guy engulfed in flames on fire, just sitting up and just being on fire and being terrified.
We wanted it to appear in a way like a man was just on fire. He's naked because his clothes have all incinerated off of his body, and he has no control over the fire. So his emotions are tied into his powers, and the more upset he gets, the more intense the fire gets.
It's something that you have to kind of work through and exercise. It's a muscle that has to get stronger. They're gonna send me on a project.
Like Ben?
We should use these powers to do something.
Some of the trickier parts of Johnny were when he was standing or when he was speaking. Reading lip sync through a man on fire is a little tricky. When he's in motion, it is a lot more forgiving because the fire moves and there's a lot visually to look at. It was actually quite difficult to convey emotion through a man who's completely on fire. The actor did an amazing performance, but once we lit him on fire, it was really hard to read a lot of his emotional performance. So we spent a long time trying to convey emotion through his flaming face. I know it's a shock, but Michael B. Jordan can't actually fly. So we did do some work with wires. He got to fly around on wires quite a bit. And then also we did a cyber scan of his body, and we created a digital version of him that we then would use to animate the scenes where he's flying. And all of the fire is simulated throughout the movie.
Victor, no. Just stop.
Out of my way, Franklin. I'm going home.
This is your home, son.
Victor gets trapped on Planet Zero, and in a way, Victor encapsulates the powers of all of them into one character. He has a little bit of each of the other characters' powers within him.
The landscape's changed.
How?
I don't know, it's just different.
It's almost like Victor, when he gets trapped there, has sucked all of the energy out of the planet and taken it for himself.
He becomes kind of the custodian for Planet Zero, if you will.
We develop suits which allow them to contain and control these conditions.
Containment suits are sort of rough around the edges, like it's technology, but it's beta technology. Reed's suit specifically has to do with holding his body together. So that's really where the term containment suit came from. It was in thinking about what Reed's suit does, and then it just really applies to the rest of them.
Reed built his suit from scrap, from whatever he can come up with. So we wanted to make sure that it had a very sort of just put together with anything he could get his hands on feel to it.
My containment suit looks like something I would have built. It's just a lot of bungee cords and stuff.
There are coils and bands that help him keep him there as he's learning to use his powers.
Reed's suit, as you see with the arms, are sort of like almost a spring system, which allows him to make use of stretching his arms out or his limbs for whatever purposes he might need. But it's a little bit more exposed. You can see the wires in the gack. It's not perfect looking just yet, so you're just implying that they'll keep inventing new stuff and perfecting and whittling and tweaking.
Johnny's suit was built supposedly by the government. Johnny is burning at 1,000 degrees or more at all times, so we have a suit that is made from some kind of fabric that helps allow him to control how much he flames and how much he doesn't flame.
Not only is he on fire, but he is a walking light source. So it was very important to me that we not cheat the lighting. So we built this light suit, and now because the technology in LEDs is so good, we were able to essentially build from head to toe a suit that he could wear that we could make very warm and flicker to look like firelight. And it was all run remotely from our dimming console. So Johnny could walk around and light the set just by that suit.
It flickered and changed and had different colors and hues of red and orange and white, and it would project light onto the characters that he was standing next to so that they would appear to be standing next to a man on fire.
Johnny, as far as filming is concerned, it's like 3 different looks, you know? You kind of go through the process of a light suit, you know, that shows like the flames and stuff, how it reflects off everything around me. And then you have the containment suit, and then sometimes you have to do a clean pass with like nothing, and I'm just, you know, naked. It's a little distracting for people on set, but we got past it.
So the suit was made from a stretch cotton. We printed 2 colors over there, some of it 3D, sort of a spider web effect. And these portions here that are solid black, in theory, don't disappear with her. And a lot of this cording is to give the feeling that there is some sort of technology involved to these different sensors, which we have all around her.
We don't consider them our superhero suits. I play it as though it's not something that I am proud of. It's not a good thing. But as an actor, it's pretty fun. When we're all together, it makes a lot of sense. And they're all very specific and different, which is cool.
It's clobbering time!
Ben gets the worst of it, if I'm honest. I think I have the worst affliction. I'm literally a rock with eyes.
He is, by default, a gentle giant, but there's this rage within him. If you're gonna trigger that, he can be pretty scary. I went to a lot of references about skin disorders and growths and fungi and all sorts of like horrifying things that happen. Just to see the ugly side of something kind of like in this nature. It's this hardened rock-like growth that has enlarged a regular-sized person into about 5 to 7 inches taller and wider than he was. And it has to look painful. It has to be tragic.
This one's a little bit more of a departure from the comic. Josh really wants to bring in very realistic textures. He wants the character to feel very uncomfortable and like he's in pain and miserable, and wants to show that with the rocks grinding together and dust coming out to make it more like a moving mountain.
The Thing essentially becomes encased in a rock shell. He's still underneath there. He's not completely made of rock. There is a soft man underneath, which is what enables him to still move after he becomes encased in rock. He is a man who is fused underneath a bunch of rock. that sort of becomes an exoskeleton.
For much of the film, the thing will be CG. So Jamie is doing the hardest of things, which in some ways is acting through not just the makeup, as the cliche goes, but through the visual effects and through his performance, giving us a tremendous amount of information as to how that character will behave and express himself.
Obviously, Thing is much larger than Jamie Bell, so we had Jamie Bell on stilts for a good portion of the film and dressed in a very court jester-like motion capture suit that we used to track all his movement and then extrapolate that and put it into the CG character.
To be on stilts and things like that, and for camera I had to wear certain things so they knew my scale and size. They're useful for me because you get a sense of like, wow, I'm bigger than everyone. Especially when I'm really not that big. I'm only like 5'8", so I'm usually all the time smaller than everybody else. So weirdly having that extra height on set and for the character, like it does kind of change your mindset a little bit for sure.
Ben is motion capture performance and animation reference, so there are mixed methods there in terms of Jamie's performance, but you're always getting the eyes of Jamie. The eyes are a huge communication tool to the world.
We also did a facial shape capture, so they capture all these different shapes that everyone makes with their face when they say different words, when they are happy, when they're sad. So they go through a whole range of emotions and words and syllables and things, and we capture all of that with about 35 cameras or so that are placed on a big wall around him as he makes all these expressions.
Jamie's just impressed us all so much each day with what he brings, and it's a character that doesn't say a lot and yet communicates a ton, and Jamie's done that beautifully.
You want it to be believable and cool, but we don't have a rock guy that we can go down the street and ask him what it's like to be a rock guy. The dynamics of a bunch of rocks together and moving against themselves is really some tough geometry to work out that our friends at MPC worked out. So if he moves too light, then he doesn't have weight, and we still have to be faithful to gravity. So you're making it up, but you're still trying to be faithful and loyal to real-world dynamics.
Look at me. I'm not your friend. You turned me into something else.
I really wanted to find something that looked both incredibly real, believable, tragic, and hard to look at, but at the same time, hard to look at for Reed.
Because even though a lot of it's CGI, as an audience, if you don't see us going through it, you don't buy it. The CGI really can only go as far as what reality we're making convincing.
Running away again?
No.
George Little and I worked for a really long time conceiving what Dr. Doom, what Victor's suit, costume, wardrobe, outfit, mask, what that was going to look like.
So this is our fourth person who goes to Planet Zero and gets left behind, and we come back to find him, and he's developed, these are portions of his suit, a lot of it's melted. Somehow it's all just sort of melded into one. There's sort of the assumption here that the plexiglass of the helmet melted onto him. This is his face. This is who he is.
His suit would be the EVA suit fused into his body, which is grotesque and uncomfortable and kind of frightening and disturbing, and that there would be ideas reminiscent of what we're familiar with the traditional Doom costume.
He amalgamates his EVA suit, his environment suit, into something that he can live in, something that he can survive in.
They would be wearing rebreathers on their face that would inadvertently be melded onto his face, and that's what is kind of looks like the Dr. Doom mask.
We went in and helped doctor it a little bit. We just kind of brought up the metal pieces and shaved a little bit of the folds in the suit. And then to bring out the energy effect, in Victor, we see this greenish energy coming through. We kind of tried to give him an internal greenish glow that's coming out in cracks in the suit, cracks in the skin, you know, little hints of it in his face.
We wanted to use green primarily because green is really the color of Dr. Doom from the comics. He wears this green cape, and since our costume had no green in it, we thought it was the perfect way to sort of bring the green from the comics but give it sort of a new twist.